Now we'll go back and focus upon the most important detail mentioned in the end of the last video lesson. Namely, that the light that came out of the nostrils of Adam Kadmon represents the root of Partzuf Ze'er Anpin in Olam Ha'atzilut. Based on this insight, we'll be able to understand what the Arizal clarifies regarding the letter Vav that we find in the light of the nostrils. Earlier, we learned that the lights that came out of the ears of Adam Kadmon are represented by the letter Hey, and that the shape of this letter Hey is comprised out of two letters, a letter Dalet as well as a letter Vav. However, here in the light of the nostrils, the Arizal tells us that the two above-mentioned letters, Dalet and Vav, actually split one from the other and became two individual letters. Indeed, with regards to this individual letter Vav, the Arizal clarifies that this letter also proceeded to split into 6 different letters, namely into 6 Aleph letters that also have the combined gematria of 6, like the letter Vav. In truth, even had this letter Vav not split into 6 parts, we would still find a great allusion to Partzuf Ze'er Anpin. After all, we know that the 4 letters of the holy 4-lettered name, Yod Kei Vav Kei, relate to the 5 Partzufim in each and every world. How so? The upper tip of the letter Yod relates to the Partzuf called Arich Anpin. The letter Yod itself relates to the Partzuf called Abba. The first letter Hey relates to the Partzuf called Ima. The letter Vav relates to the Partzuf called Ze'er Anpin. And the second letter Hey relates to the Partzuf known as the female counterpart of Ze'er Anpin. With all that said, by telling us that the letter Vav proceeded to split into 6 parts, the Arizal added an even greater allusion to the Partzuf called Ze'er Anpin, as these 6-letter Alephs correspond to the 6 corners of Ze'er Anpin, what the Arizal calls Shisha Ketzavot. These are the 6 Sefirot, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. By all means, this is a very significant change in Partzuf Ze'er Anpin compared to the other 4 Partzufim, as all the other Partzufim represent only one general Sefirah in their particular world. How so? Partzuf Arich Anpin relates only to the general Sefirah called Keter. Partzuf Abba relates only to the general Sefirah called Chokhmah. Partzuf Ima relates only to the general Sefirah called Bina, and the female counterpart of Ze'er Anpin relates only to the general Sefirah called Malchut. However, as we can see, only Partzuf Ze'er Anpin represents more than one general Sefirah in any world, and in our case, in Olam Ha'atzilut. This secret alludes to the fact that although all the other 4 Partzufim represent only one general form of governing the worlds, what the Kabbalists call Hanhaga, nevertheless, Partzuf Ze'er Anpin represents 6 different Hanhagot with which the Creator governs and monitors the world, each one distinctly different from the other. Certainly, the measure of Chesed is much different than the measure of Gevurah. And certainly, the measure of Tiferet is different from Chesed and Gevurah, as well as from all the other measures. And although, in truth, all 5 Partsufim are actually comprised out of 10 private Sefirot, nevertheless, we are currently speaking about the 10 general Sefirot that make up Olam HaAtzilut, as we already learned about the difference between the private and the general Sefirot in our first series of video lessons. The Arizal continues to point out yet another remarkable insight to strengthen why we said that the light that came out of the nostrils of Adam Kadmon represents the root of Partzuf Ze'er Anpin in Olam HaAtzilut. As we know, besides the connection that the Partzufim have with the 10 general Sefirot of Olam HaAtzilut, the 5 Partzufim are related to the 5 levels of the spiritual division known as Nar Nechi, as we already began to spell out in our last video lesson. How so? Partzuf Arich Anpin relates to the spiritual level called Yechidah. Partzuf Abba relates to the level called Chaya. Partzuf Ima relates to the level called Neshama. Partzuf Ze'er Anpin relates to the level called Ruach, and the female counterpart of Ze'er Anpin relates to the level called Nefesh. But of course, the most relevant point of interest to our current discussion is that Partzuf Ze'er Anpin relates to the spiritual level called Ruach. Based on a famous verse in the Torah, the Arizal hammers in why the light of the nostrils of Adam Kadmon, which is his nose, so to speak, is fitting to be the root of Partzuf Ze'er Anpin, which, as we said, relates to the level of Ruach. The verse that the Arizal points out states, Kol asher nishmat ruach chaim be'apav, i.e., everyone with the breath of Ruach in his nose. Therefore, the Ruach relates to one's nose, based on the rule, Mi besari echazeh Eloka, literally, from my flesh I see God. Now, this secret is even more tangible. Till this point, we spoke in depth about the letter Vav of the light of the nostrils. But what became of the other letter, i.e., the letter Dalet? You surely remember that the letter Hey that represented the light of the ears was shaped as a letter Dalet on top of a letter Vav. However, in the light that came out of the nostrils, these 2 parts of the Hey actually split into 2 individual letters, an individual letter Vav, as well as an individual letter Dalet. Regarding this letter Vav, we already learned in our last video lesson how it split into 6 Aleph letters. But what became of the other letter, i.e., the letter Dalet? Well, the Arizal teaches that this letter Dalet did actually remain one whole letter. And unlike the letter Vav, it did not split into 4 individual Aleph letters that also have a combined gematria of 4. What secret does this letter Dalet allude to? This letter Dalet alludes to the other 4 Partzufim in Olam HaAtzilut. That is to say, after learning that the letter Vav represents the fact that the light of the nostrils is the root of Partzuf Ze'er Anpin in Olam HaAtzilut, the letter Dalet therefore represents the remaining 4 parzufim which make up Olam HaAtzilut, which are not enrooted in the light of the nostrils. These parzufim are Arich Anpin, Abba, Ima, and the female counterpart of Ze'er Anpin. Now, let's go back and speak even more about the above-mentioned letter Vav. You should know that one letter Vav came out of the right nostril of Adam Kadmon, as well as another letter Vav that came out of the left nostril. And although, in truth, the light that came out of both nostrils is essentially one unified light made out of 10 unified Sefirot, nevertheless, we already learned that the light of the nostrils is comprised out of a surrounding or mekif that came out of the right nostril, as well as an internal or penimi that came out of the left nostril. Based on this, the Arizal points out that there is one letter Vav in the light of the right nostril, as well as a second letter Vav in the light that came out of the left nostril. However, since each one of these 2 letter Vavs split into 6 Alephs, therefore we find 12 Aleph letters altogether, which have the combined gematria of 12. And when we count the Chotem itself as one more unit, we find the combined gematria of 13 in the light of the nostrils, as we know that according to one of the rules of gematria, we sometimes add one more number to the gematria of the letters, what we call im hakolel. And indeed, in our case, the Chotem itself is what composites and unites the 12 Aleph letters which came out of the 2 nostrils of Adam Kadmon. Not only that, but the Arizal proceeds to point out that the Chotem is actually shaped like the letter Aleph. How so? The most commonly known shape of the letter Aleph is in the form of 2 Yod letters, connected to one tilted letter Vav, one above it and one below it. And as we know, the nose is also shaped as 2 holes, i.e. 2 nostrils, each of which resembles the shape of the letter Yod, one from this side and one from the other side. Inasmuch we find that the only thing that separates and stands between these 2 Yod letters is the wall of the nose between the 2 nostrils, which itself has the shape of a letter Vav. For our discussion, we can say that this letter Vav is what connects the 2 Yod letters that represent the 2 nostrils. In this fashion, we find yet another letter Aleph in the shape of the Chotem itself. And when we combine this additional letter Aleph with the gematria of the 2 letter Vavs that came out of the 2 nostrils, we again find the gematria of 13. And at this point, I assume that you are all asking, what's so special about the number 13 that we find in the lights of the Chotem in the 2 above-mentioned ways? The Arizal clarifies that 13 is actually the gematria of Vav Aleph Vav, which is the expansion of the 3rd part of Shem Sag, as you can see. And indeed, the main nuance that characterizes Shem Sag is this 3rd part, which is the only difference between this expansion and the expansion of Shem Ab, which precedes it. As you can see, The letter Yod that was sandwiched between the two Vav letters in the third part of Shem Ab changed here in Shem Sag to a letter Aleph. In other words, we can say that the expansion of Vav Aleph Vav is the symbol or the emblem of Shem Sag. And indeed, by revealing this secret, the Arizal impresses upon us that the lights that came out of the two nostrils are actually part of the general Shem Sag of Adam Kadmon. As we learned earlier, that the light of the nostrils represents the middle Te'amim of the general Shem Sag. Or, according to the second division of the spiritual realm that we learned, we can classify these lights as the Ma element of the private Shem Ab element of the general Shem Sag. And of course, the gematria of Chotem with the letter Vav comes out exactly 63. As we know that this is also the gematria of Shem Sag. We already mentioned on more than one occasion that there is a very strong correlation between the te'amim of the Torah reading in our physical world, what we call the cantillations, and their spiritual root in the different te'amim which make up the Shem Sag of Adam Kadmon. Specifically, the most relevant detail for our discussion is that there are only two middle te'amim, which are positioned between the letters. They are the cantillation known as Pasek and the cantillation known as Makaf. When we carefully investigate the shape of these two cantillations, we find that they both have the shape of the letter Vav. After all, the cantillation known as Pasek has the shape of a vertical letter Vav positioned between two words that tells the person reading from the Torah to pause between these two words. On the other hand, the cantillation known as Makaf has the shape of a horizontal letter Vav that is positioned between two words that tells the person reading from the Torah to connect these two words as if they were actually only one word. And of course, the spiritual reason why these two middle cantillations have the shape of a Vav is because in their spiritual root, in the lights that came out of Adam Kadmon, the middle te'amim of the general Shem Sag are represented by the light of the nostrils. And we already learned that the light of the nostrils is represented by the letter Dalet and the letter Vav. Well, as we can see, both the cantillation known as Pasek as well as the cantillation known as Makaf have the shape of the letter Vav. But what's the connection between these two middle cantillations and the letter Dalet? As the Arizal points out, when we take these two cantillations, i.e. the Pasek and the Makaf, and join them together, we find that this combination of a vertical Vav as well as a horizontal Vav together form the shape of the letter Dalet. Indeed, this is the connection we've been looking for between the letter Dalet and the middle te'amim of the general Shem Sag of Adam Kadmon.